Order, order. We start with questions. The Secretary of State for the Home Department. Pete Wishart.
Number 1, Mr Speaker.
Minister.
I thank the honourable gentleman for his question. He has raised this issue on a number of occasions. He will be aware that we are not introducing a Scottish visa scheme or devolving control of immigration policy, and this has been made clear to the Scottish Government. Instead, we must together address the underlying causes of skills shortages and overseas recruitment in different parts of the UK, which this Government is doing.
Pete Wishart.
I thank the Minister for a tiresome and repetitive response. She will know that Scotland has a whole range of demographic and population difficulties that need urgently addressed. Every sector, from social care to hospitality, including business leaders, are calling out for drastic actions. Even her Scottish Labour colleagues are beginning to understand the enormity of this task. Today, we find that Labour's grotesque 3-child benefit cap is now having an impact on Scotland's birth rate. So instead of slapping down her Scottish colleagues, and instead of rejecting this out of hand, why doesn't she work with us just to see if it might actually work?
Yeah.
The honourable gentleman will know that net migration must come down, which trebled under the last government, largely driven by overseas recruitment. Immigration is a reserved matter, working in the interest of the whole of the UK. And previous schemes along the lines that he has suggested has only succeeded in restricting movement and rights and creating internal UK borders. Adding different rules for different locations would also increase complexity and create frictions when workers move locations.
Chris Murray.
It's a diverse place. Some areas are seeing depopulation, but areas like East Lothian, which I represent, are seeing unprecedented population growth. Will the Minister commit to working constructively with the Scottish Government on their woeful population strategy, which in 17 years has comprehensively failed to address Scotland's demographic challenges?
We are committed to working with the Scottish Government on this and all issues. And indeed, many of the levers to address depopulation in Scotland are through powers the Scottish Government already has at its disposal. Indeed, the reasons for local workers leaving particular areas must be addressed through investment in jobs, in infrastructure and public services. Many of these are issues that we must tackle also together.
Brickell.
Number 2, Mr Speaker.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Fraud accounts for 39% of all crime survey England and Wales crime and was the most common type of crime in the year ending March 2024. It is a crime that destroys lives, and we are committed to working with law enforcement and industry to better protect the public and businesses from the fraud threats they face.
Brickell.
39% of all reported crime is fraud, and many offences are carried out by serious organised crime gangs. The National Crime Agency is tasked with protecting my constituents from foreign origin fraud and serious organised crime. But a recent report from Spotlight on corruption found that after 14 years of Conservative government, the NCA was, and I quote, on its knees, spending millions of pounds on consultants and failing to retain investigators. What steps is the Minister taking to make sure that the NCA is able to protect my constituents from financial crime?
Well, let me take the opportunity to pay tribute to the NCA for their operational leadership and focus on tackling economic crime. Through collaborating with jurisdictions of risk, we are making it harder for organised crime groups to target the UK victims. The National Fraud Squad, run by the NCA's National Economic Crime Centre and the City of London Police, with 400 new officers by next year, has boosted their ability to tackle the highest harm international offenders. We are working to deliver a workforce strategy to address retention challenges for fraud. This is important work which impacts on all our constituents, and it is a priority area for this government.
Pritchard.
Speaker, the Minister will know that online harm goes beyond fraud and can impact people's lives through suicide sites, those signposting people to unregulated sites that lead people to a place that none of us would want to see them go. He will know that the EU Commission are currently investigating Facebook and Instagram. The United States have the Kids Online Safety Act, which, if it passes through Congress, will make a huge impact. Why is it left in the United Kingdom and in England and Wales, Scotland and Northern Ireland, wherever you are, for parents to take their own litigation against these big tech companies? Isn't it time the government did more?
I'm grateful to the Right Honourable Gentleman for that point, and we are doing more. I can assure him that this is a key priority for the Department, not least because 70% of fraud has an international element, particularly online. Approximately 1 in 18 adults were victims of fraud in the year ending March 2024. Noble Lord Hanson leads on this for the Department. He and I are working closely with a range of other government departments, including the Treasury and with DSIT. This is a priority and we need to do more on it.
Ruth Gabriel.
Question number 3, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Mr. Speaker, with permission, I'll group this question with questions 4, 8 and 24. Neighbourhood policing is the bedrock of the British policing model. In many areas of the country in recent years, it has been decimated. This government is committed to rebuilding neighbourhood policing, putting officers, PCSOs and specials back in our communities with new powers to tackle antisocial behaviour and local crime.
Ruth Gabriel.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My constituents, quite rightly, want to see more neighbourhood police teams on their streets. I welcome the government's commitment to bring in 10,000 more neighbourhood police officers, but could the Secretary of State assure me that West London will get the neighbourhood police teams that we need?
Well, my honourable friend is right that we now have thousands fewer police and PCSOs on the streets than we had a decade ago, including them halving the number of PCSOs and cutting by 2/3 the number of specials. So the newly elected government is now working at pace to introduce a new neighbourhood policing guarantee, putting the police and PCSOs back on the streets, and we've announced the funding and support for the National College of Policing to begin the national rollout of specialist training for neighbourhood officers in order to professionalise and strengthen the work they do in every corner of the country.
Chris Vance.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. May I welcome the Home Secretary to her place. My constituent of Harlow is a community that's been let down by a lack of neighbourhood policing. Can I ask what the Home Secretary will do to address this issue, both in terms of police on the streets but also the resources that they have?
My honourable friend makes a really important point. This is the same challenge we're facing right across the country. The proportion of people saying they barely ever see the police is now nearly a half, up from a quarter when the Conservatives came into power in 2010. That has been deeply damaging to confidence. We need the police back on the beat, but they also need the powers to act. That is why we will also bring forward new powers to tackle shoplifting and antisocial behaviour, especially in our town centres.
Peter Swallow.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Residents in Bracknell are concerned that increasing numbers of drug users and drug dealers on our streets, an issue I raised recently when I met with our neighbourhood policing team. But what more support can be given to the local police and other local services to get drug dealers off our streets?
Well, my honourable friend makes an important point, and issues around drug dealing and drug misuse alongside other forms of antisocial behaviour and crime in different communities are a real challenge, which means, first of all, we need to actually get the neighbourhood police back on the beat in order to be able to address these challenges, but they also need greater powers, including we will introduce respect orders that will allow the police to take action against repeat offenders and make sure that our streets and communities can be kept safe.
Deirdre Costigan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In Ealing Southall, religious organisations are spending their own money protecting worshippers from antisocial behaviour and crime in the early mornings, with Sri Guru Singh Sabha Gurdwara, for example, spending £3,000 to £4,000 a week on patrols and security measures. I recently called a crime summit. Police are trying their best, but the community needs more police on the streets and a return to neighbourhood policing. Can the Minister tell me what progress has been made in recruiting the much-needed 13,000 new police and community support officers we need to restore trust in the safety of our communities, or of our town centres?
Can we please address through the chair as well? It's not through its third-party stuff. Hobson.
I thank my honourable friend for the leadership she is showing in her community, but the point she makes is partly about making sure that we can increase the number of neighbourhood police, which is part of this Labour government's plan, but also to make sure that we have those partnerships in place between the police and local communities, rather than communities feeling like they have to do this alone. It's that partnership between the police and communities that's at the heart of the British policing model, policing by consent, and that is what we need to restore and rebuild after the damage that has been done.
The cost of rural crime shot up by 41% in the South West between 2022 and 2023, while 86% of respondents to a recent NFU survey said that rural crime was negatively affecting farmers' mental health. So how is the department supporting neighbourhood officers, rural beats, to adequately deal with the heightened levels of rural crime?
The honourable member makes a serious point, because we need to increase neighbourhood policing in rural areas too, and also to recognise the additional different kinds of challenges that rural areas can face, both in terms of the geography but also particular kinds of crime, for example, that have affected farmers and farming equipment. And that is why we have set out our intention to draw up a new rural crime action plan alongside our plans for neighbourhood policing.
Graham Stewart.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Under the last Conservative government, excluding fraud and computer misuse, crime actually fell by 50%. And I'm pleased to say that in Beverley and Holderness across the rest of the country, it was community groups, local people and the police working together who helped do that. And in the Cherry Tree Centre, working with local community, saw antisocial behaviour in the St Nicholas area of Beverley reduced by 43% year on year by last summer. What will the Secretary of State do to ensure this kind of community cooperation leads to further cuts in crime, which was so welcome under the Conservatives?
Well, I would caution the honourable member against excluding, obviously, one of the most common crimes in the country from his figures. I would just also point out to him that it is some of the crimes that are actually most heavily impact on town centres at the very heart of local communities, like shoplifting and street crime, street theft, which have soared in recent years, and there has been no response at all from the previous government. We are making those a priority as part of our plans to change some of the laws around shoplifting and assaults on shop workers, as well as getting more police back on the beat.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. One of the biggest problems being faced by the neighbourhood police team in Cheadle is antisocial behaviour and the scourge of off-road bikes. What is the Secretary of State doing to help Greater Manchester Police tackle off-road bikes in our communities?
The member is right that off-road bikes is a total nightmare in some communities, and I've talked to residents who are just driven mad by the scourge of off-road biking, dangerous off-road bikes that are used to harass and to intimidate people. We are looking at ways to strengthen the law on off-road biking in order to be able to give the police the powers that they need to tackle this kind of damaging antisocial behaviour.
Alison Griffiths.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Given her great concern for shoplifting and antisocial behaviour, will she now make an assessment on the Putting It Right scheme for young offenders that has been piloted very successfully in my constituency of Bognor Regis and Littlehampton?
I welcome the points that the honourable member has made, because it is really important that in order to tackle shoplifting, we need to make sure that there are strong enough laws in place, that there's strong enough partnerships in terms of policing, but also that we do the prevention work and the follow-up work with young people. As you may know, we are setting up a new Young Futures programme, which is all about the greater work we need to do to prevent young people being drawn into crime in the first place, and I would encourage her to send us more details of her local work in order to tackle this.
Shadow Minister Matt Vickers.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The last Conservative government stood with our brave police officers and emergency service workers, introducing tougher sentences for those who assaulted them, introduced the Elizabeth Medal to recognise those who lost their lives in the line of duty, and we're looking to recognise those who were discharged from service as a result of injuries on the front line. Will the Minister continue this work, and will she meet with me and former policeman Tim Curry, who has been leading an excellent campaign on this important issue?
Well, I have long been a strong supporter of the Elizabeth Medal, and I would pay tribute to the work of Bryn Hughes and others to campaign for that recognition of police officers and other emergency workers who have been lost in the line of duty and who have given so much to support other people, to keep others safe. I have attended the Police Bravery Awards every year for the last 14 years, exactly because I think it is so important to support brave officers, and I am absolutely determined to ensure that we not only continue that work, but also go further to support brave officers who put their lives at risk. I'm very happy to continue cross-party working on this issue.
Liberal Democrat spokesperson, Lisa Smart.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. In Greater Manchester, the right care, right person approach has recently been introduced as a police response when it's a mental health related call is not always the right fit. There are growing concerns, though, about some unclear lines of responsibility between mental health services and police, and that may cause cases to be mishandled. What steps is the government taking to ensure that this coordination between police and mental health services is as clear and effective as it can be, so that those who most need the support don't fall through the cracks?
Yeah. The honourable member raises a very important issue, and that coordination between police and mental health services can be crucial in some of the most serious cases where people are a danger to the public, perhaps linked to mental health crisis, but also to many cases where someone is not a danger to the public and where actually mental health professionals may be far better than police officers being able to respond. There has been significant work done, but she is right that we need much further close working between police and mental health services across the country. This will also be part of the work my right honourable friend is doing in the NHS and Health Department on improving mental health services.
Say to Home Secretary, please look at me occasionally, it would help. Amanda Martin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Question 5.
Mr. Speaker, apologies, I always like the chance to be able to look towards you. Mr. Speaker, with question 5, may I group, with your permission, can I group this question with question 16?
Martin.
To answer it. We are Mr. Speaker, the criminal smuggler and trafficking gangs who organise small boats are undermining our border security and putting lives at risk, and it is truly tragic that a little baby died in the Channel this weekend. Those gangs have been getting away with this for far too long. That is why the government has set up a new border security command led by former police chief Martin Hewitt to work with other countries to go after those gangs.
Amanda Martin.
Mr. Speaker, small boats crossings is an issue raised by residents, but we also know that organised crime stretches beyond people smuggling. In my constitution of Ports of North, we recently saw the sentencing of a criminal gang smuggling 2.3 million tonnes of cocaine into the city from Colombia. Can the Minister expand on how we are tackling organised crime relating to drugs and dangerous weapons into our ports to ensure that these do not hit our streets?
Honourable friend makes an important point because there are many different threats to our border security, and that's why we've set up the Border Security Command to draw together the work of different agencies. If that comes to issues around dangerous drug smuggling and organised crime, bringing together the Border Force, the National Crime Agency, intelligence and security agencies, and also local police forces as well. The Border Security Command's first priority will be to deal with the dangerous boat crossings that are undermining security and putting lives at risk. But as part of their work, they will be dealing with the wider threats to our borders as well.
Damien Egan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thank the Home Secretary for her answer about the criminal gangs. People in Bristol North East also asked me about deterrence. So what reassurance can I give them that this is being backed up with measures to stop illegal working by people that don't have a right to work here?
My honourable friend makes an important point about the way in which employers have exploited illegal migration. We set up, as a result, a major programme through the summer including raids, including pursuing illegal working in different places across the country. We have also substantially increased our work around returns, including 1,000 additional staff redeployed into returns and enforcement, leading to a more than 20% increase in enforced returns this summer to make sure the rules are being properly respected and enforced.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Given that dangerous foreign criminals have been using the ECHR as a loophole to remain in the UK, would the Home Secretary agree with me it is time to leave the ECHR and restore the sovereignty of our own borders?
The purpose of setting up a Border Security Command is in order to strengthen the security of our borders. We will do that by working with other countries, and it is crucial that we work with other countries to tackle the gangs and the boats before they reach the French coast in the first place. We have increased our cooperation with new agreements in place with the G7, with Europol, with Italy, working on new agreements with France, Germany and Belgium. Those agreements will not be possible if we are somehow abandoning international law.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As the House will be aware, there's been a recent number of crossings, which means that is the Home Secretary considering reopening the hotels to house asylum seekers? And if so, will she commit to keeping the House informed about the methodology for choosing those hotels and making sure constituency MPs are informed at the appropriate time?
I do take seriously the importance of ensuring that constituency MPs are informed. That often didn't happen in the past. I think it does need to happen and is important. But the overall situation that we had inherited included a backlog that was increasing, an asylum backlog that was increasing, because asylum decision-making had totally collapsed. We have now increased that asylum decision-making so that we can clear the backlog and so that we can end hotel use. We know that, sadly, that will take time as a result of what we have inherited with the soaring backlog as a result of the collapse in decision-making, but we are determined to make sure that we can clear the backlog and save the taxpayer hundreds of millions, if not billions, of pounds.
Shadow Minister Paul Holmes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. £540 million to upgrade Manston Centre, a claim she'd smashed the gangs, asylum hotels reopening rapidly, and 14,000 small boat crossings since she took office. Is this the plan that she had for her new border commander? And how's the plan going? Might it be fair to say not very well?
Well, I'll just gently point out to the honourable member that what we inherited from them was in the first 6 months of the year, the highest number of boat crossings on record because of the total failure of the previous government's programme, including spending £700 million on a Rwanda scheme to send 4 volunteers to Rwanda. And as for the contract, he may be interested to know on Manston, the first Manston contract notice was issued on the 4th of December 2023 under the previous Home Secretary, a contract for £700 million for 6 years with no suggested break clauses. The new contract is not only substantially cheaper because we have made savings, it also includes break clauses so that we can close or change or reduce the contract to save the taxpayer money, something the previous government failed to do.
Number 6, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, with your permission, I will group this response with questions 11 and 14. Restoring confidence in policing is one of the core aims of the government's Safer Streets mission. That means ensuring robust response to the crimes that devastate lives and corrode our communities. We are also committed to improving police standards and will announce steps to strengthen the police misconduct and vetting system shortly.
Mr. Speaker, it's almost 2 years since Warwickshire Police issued a CPN against Warwickshire Hunt. 8 months later, it was mysteriously replaced by a secret protocol. The Police Crime Commissioner, who receives financial support from the Countryside Alliance, claims that he knew nothing of the protocol. The Chief Constable refused to give me a copy, and now she's resigned, claiming retirement. Trust in the PCC and the leadership of Warwickshire Police has been seriously damaged. So will she meet with me to discuss the need for a truly independent inquiry as opposed to the sham one being undertaken by the PCC?
I thank my honourable friend, and as a local to Warwickshire, I take a keen interest in these matters myself, and of course will meet with him along with the policing minister. It is vitally important that the public can trust that those who police us and those who are in charge of our police are held to account as everybody else should be.
Jane Kirkham.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Despite town and city councils in Cornwall employing street rangers, ASB officers and having shop watch radios funded from their precept or business improvement districts, shop managers still struggle with shoplifting in ASB. And the record under our Conservative PCC on answering and responding to 101s is poor, and these crimes are chronically underreported. Shop workers feel powerless. There's a desperate need for more neighbourhood police. Can the Minister explain how trust in police and the rule of law will be restored to retail staff and shop managers?
I thank my honourable friend, and as the Home Secretary has laid out today, the issue of extra neighbourhood policing isn't just important because we need more police on our street, but because when our constituents call the police and shop workers and those who own our businesses, when they call the police, if they get no response, confidence drops. And it is vitally important that all of those neighbourhood police that will be across the country, including in Cornwall, will help with confidence, not just with crime.
I thank the Minister for her answers. Mr. Speaker, we have seen a toxic culture in some police services, including WhatsApps that are racist, homophobic and sexist, displaying deep prejudice. Could the Minister clarify when the multiple recommendations from the Home Office review into the process of police officer dismissals will be actioned, including changing the law so that those who fail re-vetting can be more simply dismissed?
I thank the honourable lady, and couldn't agree with her more that we need to strengthen this area, with women especially feeling a lower confidence over the last few years. And we will announce in due course, and I promise her we are working on this at pace, all of our announcements on how we're going to ensure that police conduct and vetting systems are fit for purpose and can bring back some of that trust that has been lost.
Hussain.
Mr. Speaker, I welcome the Home Secretary's response in respect of antisocial behaviour involving e-scooters and bikes. However, I wish to reiterate the concerns of my residents in Blackburn. Will she consider not only additional powers for the police, but civil powers for local authorities to combat hotspot areas before somebody is seriously hurt? Thank you.
As the Home Secretary has already outlined with regard to antisocial behaviour and neighbourhood policing, that of course, and as the Home Secretary has already said, that we will be bringing in respect orders to ensure that antisocial behaviour in areas is tackled and targeted in a way that it just simply hasn't been in recent years.
Shadow Home Secretary.
Mr. Speaker, the operational independence of the police goes to the heart of public confidence in policing. As Foreign Secretary, I saw where political interference in policing is rife, and that is not a direction that the UK should travel in. So does the Home Secretary believe it is right for ministers to overrule the threat assessment of police and the security services? Does she believe that some free concert tickets is the appropriate price for scrapping police independence? And after the appalling results of recent negotiations with the BMA, the RMT and Mauritius, has she considered recruiting Taylor Swift's mum as a government negotiator?
It is this falls to me to answer it. What I will say is that, as the right honourable gentleman knows fine well, operational decisions for policing fall to the police in this situation and in every other one. I would certainly welcome Taylor Swift's mother to stand for the leadership of the Conservative Party. I think that she would really offer something that is not currently available. What I will say, because this question has been listed under confidence, is that the confidence of women in policing and being able to keep women in our country secure has dived under the previous government. And so confidence definitely needs to be restored.
We don't want the squabbles afterwards. James Cleverly.
Mr. Speaker, again, having been Home Secretary, I have on numerous occasions had to deal with the requests of foreign VIPs for a level of protection that they demanded or requested, but which we did not feel was appropriate. Does the Right Honourable Lady recognise the difficult position she has now put her own Foreign Secretary into when those future requests come in and they have to be denied, when those individuals will pray an aid to the protection package put in place for a rock star?
I suppose what I would wish to remind the honourable gentleman and the House is that concerts were cancelled in Vienna because of a terror threat that the CIA identified could harm tens of thousands of people. I sat in this very chamber, Mr. Speaker, last week in front of Fegan Murray, the mother of Martin, who was killed at an event in Manchester in this country. The idea that we shouldn't take this security very seriously is, I'm afraid, something I simply don't agree with.
Laurel Session-Lobby.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Question number 7.
Mr. Speaker, knife crime takes far too many young lives in this country, so this government has set a mission, not just for the government, but for policing, for local communities right across the country, to halve knife crime over the next decade. As part of that, we've already implemented the ban on zombie knives and zombie-style machetes, and we'll act quickly now to ban ninja swords following the campaigning by Pooja Kanda after the death of her son.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thank the Home Secretary for that reply on knife crime. I welcome the government's commitment on the Young Futures programme to prevent young people being drawn into crime, especially the fact that a number of our girl-associated gangs are drawn into crime. And we know that rape and sexual exploitation is such a traumatising experience, but yet, for so many of those young girls, they don't see themselves as victims. There are some fantastic organisations like Abianda Milk Honeybees working to support women. Can I ask the Home Secretary that she will assure me that the department will look at a tailored support for young women in the Young Futures programme?
My honourable friend makes a really important point, and I know this is an issue that she has championed over many years. The Young Futures programme will include both youth hubs to draw together services around young people. I previously used the sort of concept idea of a teenage Sure Start to bring services together around young people, but also we need youth prevention programmes across all areas. And she is right to highlight this has to be about young girls as well as young boys, to make sure that we can tackle the threats to young people's safety from violent crime.
Ms Davies.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Helping young people to stay safe, have somewhere to go and, crucially, someone to talk to is key in the transitions in your life, particularly as a young person, to stop you being drawn into ASB, retail crime, or indeed knife or gang crime. Could the Home Secretary confirm that support will continue through devolution of assistance to police and crime commissioners, such as Katie Bourne in Sussex, who can have that direct link between my residents' concerns about their young people and work with local police to take those preventative measures?
So police and crime commissioners do have a crucial role to play as part of the mission to reduce serious violence. So too do local authorities. And she is right that it is those partnerships at the very local level that will best be able to target the young people who are at greatest risk and make sure that there are proper prevention programmes in place. As we know that many of those services have been hollowed out over a long period of time, and it's really important that we have partnership working to rebuild those, and I hope that this will be something that works cross-party, not just with police and crime commissioners, but with MPs across the country too.
Bell Ribeiro, Addy.
Number 9, Mr Speaker.
Just like my honourable friend, the government values the role of peaceful protest as part of our proud democratic tradition. The government regularly reviews the adequacy of existing legislation.
Well, Ribeiro, Addy.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. The right to protest and the courage of people taking to the streets to demand change has given us many of our cherished social advancements, from the suffragettes demanding the votes for women and the Race Relations Act. But the sheer numbers of powers to restrict protests is resulting in peaceful protesters being arrested and sentenced to lengthy periods in prison. The previous government actually pushed through a range of laws despite opposition from senior policing figures and opposition across all parties. So can the Minister confirm when a comprehensive review of the state of protest will take place, with a view to repealing powers that unnecessarily restrict the right to peaceful protest?
I'm grateful to my honourable friend for raising this important issue. As my honourable friend knows, there will be post-legislative scrutiny of the legislation passed by the previous government, and as the previous government agreed, that will be considered in due course.
Richard Holdham.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr Speaker. Recent footage of the Metropolitan Police officers saying that the description of Hezbollah as a terror group was a matter of opinion is alarming. The officers in question were deployed to a march in central London where support for Hezbollah was openly displayed, yet many offenders are only identified via photos on social media after the event. Will the Home Secretary ensure that all officers are fully briefed on the prescribed status of Hezbollah, Hamas and other terrorist organisations, so that offenders are arrested on the spot and not allowed to spew anti-Semitic hate on our streets?
Well, we're all clear that Hezbollah are a prescribed organisation. We know that the police take great care when they police protests. We know there's a great deal of briefing beforehand for officers, but of course it's operationally independent, the way that those protests are policed. I myself have been to see and talk to officers who are on the front line at these protests and know that it is a very difficult job, and we all should say a big thank you to the work that they do. Often there's been many protests over the last 12 months that they've had to deal with, and I know that many police officers have had rest days cancelled to ensure that there is adequate policing on our streets.
Neil Coyle.
Members of the Safety Action Group were told recently by Southwark officers that they struggle to prevent or solve crime due to extraction duties policing repeat protests elsewhere in London. Does the Minister believe that the Met needs new powers to refuse permission for some repetitive protests in the capital, or should it use existing powers better to resolve and reduce extraction duties and increase safety in my community?
Well, could I say to my honourable friend, there is an issue obviously about police numbers, and that's why one of the things that this government is very clear about is recruiting more neighbourhood police officers and seeing that increase, so we have that presence on our streets. But I recognise what the honourable gentleman has said about abstraction. I know that is an issue for the Metropolitan Police in particular in dealing with protests, and clearly we want all criminals to be dealt with by the police, and we need sufficient numbers of police officers to do that.
Christy Jardine.
Very much, Mr Speaker. While we respect and would protect the right for peaceful protest, it's at many of these recent protests where we've seen the reporting of anti-Semitic and Islamophobic offences, which have contributed to an astonishing and shocking 25% increase revealed last week in religiously aggravated hate crimes in this country. The CST have reported almost 500% rise in anti-Semitic incidents, and Tell Mama have had the highest ever number of anti-Muslim incidents. So can you reassure us about what the government is going to do to help the police to continue to keep communities safe and police these protests in a way that does that?
I think those figures that the Honourable Lady has set out are shocking. And this government is very clear that there is no place in our society for anti-Semitism or for Islamophobia. And there are meetings already going on around how we can tackle this rise. It's shocking and it will not be tolerated. And clearly we know in some of the protests that we've had in recent times, the police have had a very difficult job to do. But I do commend the work that they are doing to tackle this anti-Semitism and this Islamophobia. We know the police take their responsibilities very seriously and they police without fear or favour.
Andrew Rossman.
Question 10, Mr. Speaker.
The government is, of course, committed to ensuring that the police have the resources they need to tackle crime effectively. Funding beyond this year, I'm sure, as the Honourable Gentleman knows, including for the Metropolitan Police Service, will be confirmed following the up-and-coming multi-year spending review.
Andrew Rossman.
Mr. Speaker, given the increasing pressures on the police service, does the Minister accept that officer morale, retention, recruitment and the ability to solve crimes are severely compromised, with police officers overworked, underpaid and subjected to unprecedented levels of a rise in bureaucratic process, often dealing with things that police aren't traditionally meant to deal with, such as mental health care and social work? So, will she explain how the government plans to address these critical issues, especially in terms of improving officer retention, recruitment, crime-solving capacity and the overwhelming levels of bureaucracy so that constituents in Romford can feel safe in their own town again?
Mr Rosendale, you should know better. I didn't cough twice for my benefit. It was meant to be for yours.
The Honourable Gentleman is a very experienced member of this House. He has supported 14 years of Conservative government, which have left us now coming into government with a criminal justice system, including policing, which is in grave difficulty. I take the point he raises, but he really needs to recognise the role that he and his party have played in getting us to this point. Our aim now is to recruit more police officers, as the Home Secretary has said, to increase neighbourhood policing as the bedrock of policing in this country.
Dame McNeil.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, as well as wanting to see more funding in Havering and Hackney and across London for our police, we also, if we can see a reduction in crime, this will also help the police. So what conversations are ministers having with the manufacturers of mobile phones so that they can try and drive out phone snatches by bike and help reduce that really growing street crime in London?
I'm very grateful to my honourable friend for raising that point, and those conversations are ongoing, and there will be conversations later this month, actually, on this very point of what more can be done to ensure that the manufacturers take their responsibilities seriously and do everything they can to stop the trade in parts, which is one of the issues with, particularly with mobile phones.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Question 12, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I suspect I might be coughing almost as much as you, but for a completely different reason. We constantly update our assessment of LGBT rights and other factors affecting the safety of different countries, working closely with the Foreign Office and informed by regular independent reports from the Chief Inspector of Borders and Immigration. The latest update for Georgia was published last month and is available on the gov.uk website.
I thank my honourable friend for her response. Mr. Speaker, the safe states designation that the previous government introduced is intended to allow Georgian and Indian nationals to be returned without any individualised assessment of the safety of that country for that particular person. In both countries, persecution against certain minorities is on the rise, which makes their inclusion on this list particularly wrong. But it also highlights the wider dangers of blanket inadmissibility of asylum claims based on nationality. So what steps will the government take to ensure that individuals' asylum claims are always properly assessed?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thank my honourable friend for raising this important issue and bringing her concerns to the attention of the House, concerns I share. We regularly monitor and review the situation in countries of origin, working closely with the Foreign Office, and our resulting country policy and information notes are published on the website. Should we assess that the troubling new law she refers to, or any other changes that fundamentally affect the justification for Georgia's designation, then we will seek to remove it from the list using the correct parliamentary process.
Jim Shannon.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I thank the Minister very much for her answer? Minister, when it comes to any country, Georgia in particular, there's an evidential base which ensures and proves to be the case that the persecution of Christians and ethnic minorities and those other human rights abuses are taking place. So when it comes to addressing the issue of LGBT rights as well, it's also important that those issues are engaged with. Can I ask the Minister this question? Has the opportunity been given to the Honourable Lady to address these directly with Georgia's government? Thank you.
It's more of a Foreign Office issue to address such issues, which is why we liaise very closely with the Foreign Office when we're considering the production of these information notes. And I can tell him that all the way that laws that are passed in other countries are actually put into effect, and if they lead to persecution or a well-founded fear of persecution of individuals, that is one of the contexts we use to make a decision. That includes LGBT rights, but it also includes other rights too.
Come to topicals. Katrina Murray.
Number one, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, organised immigration crime puts lives at risk and threatens our border security. We have agreed a new anti-smuggling action plan with our G7 partners to strengthen collaboration on areas such as intelligence, information exchange and the pursuit of criminal finances. The UK work will be led by the new Border Security Command, and as evidence of our closer collaboration with other countries, this weekend, at the request of the French authorities, a border force vessel rescued 46 people and returned it to France.
Katrina Murray.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. According to research from UK Feminista, over a third of female school pupils have been sexually harassed whilst at school. Much of this can be traced back to misogynistic online influencers and harmful impacts of pornography. Can the Minister tell the House what she is doing to prioritise women's online safety and how she is engaging with counterparts in the devolved administration to ensure no woman or girl is left behind when it comes to ending sexual harassment and exploitation of women?
My honourable friend makes an extremely important point. As part of the mission for safer streets that the government has set includes a really ambitious mission to halve violence against women and girls in a decade. We know that that is immensely difficult. I hope it is something that all of the devolved administrations will want to be part of, as well as local communities and organisations. But she is right to prioritise online women's safety, and it's why my honourable friend, the Minister for Science and Technology, is prioritising action on online deepfake abuse.
We now come to James Cleverly, Shadow Home Secretary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In her statement to the House on the 29th of July this year, the Chancellor said that asylum accommodation costs being drawn down from Treasury reserves were, and I quote, unfunded and undisclosed, a description that I reject. So can the Home Secretary now confirm to the House that asylum accommodation costs will be disclosed, but more importantly, funded from her departmental budget, and that she will not be drawing down from Treasury reserves to pay for the asylum accommodation costs? Or does she reject the Chancellor's description, and will she fund these costs in the same way that I did?
Well, I have to say, the former Home Secretary, the current Shadow Home Secretary, does now seem to be admitting the totally chaotic state of asylum accommodation finances, where he had to continually seek last-minute reserve claims because they had underfunded the asylum accommodation problems that they had caused by letting the asylum backlog soar, and as a result, the taxpayer ended up footing the bill. This government will be will be making savings from asylum accommodation by getting the system back in order. And I know the honourable member has been kicked out of the Tory party leadership contest because he can't count.
I'm going to say to the Home Secretary, I expect short answers. These are topicals. If there's other questions you want to go along, do them early. We will be staying here longer than you probably expected, because it's not fair to the backbencher on either side that I've got to represent. James Cleverly, let's have a good example of a short topic.
Will she be drawing down from Treasury reserves, yes or no?
Secretary.
Well, this government has already been putting in place the funding to try and make good the total chaos that his government left us with. £700 million to send 4 volunteers to Rwanda. And how much did he spend on a flight?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As I know the Home Secretary is aware from her substantial work on this issue, refugee women and girls, often already survivors of gender-based violence, are at significant risk of abuse, coercion and worse when housed in hotels pending their application being processed. Could the Minister please update the House on what steps the Department is taking to end the use of hotel accommodation for women and girls?
Well, the honourable member is right that we have an extensive challenge with the backlog, meaning that asylum accommodation is too often using very expensive hotels. We need to clear the backlog. We need to make sure that we can end hotel use, but that also means addressing the serious challenges around violence against women and girls.
Democrat spokesperson Lisa Smart.
Speaker, this is Black History Month, and we honour the Windrush generation who were let down shamefully by the previous Conservative government. First, by the appalling Windrush scandal itself, but then by their failure to fully implement the Williams Review and compensation scheme. The Parliamentary Ombudsman has now found the Home Office is wrongly denying compensation payments. So will the Home Secretary commit to urgently appointing a Windrush Commissioner, like she promised back in June, to lead on righting these wrongs?
We will be appointing a Windrush Commissioner. This is something that I do feel strongly about. She will know, as previously as Select Committee Chair, I asked many questions around the Windrush scandal. It is a stain on not just the Home Office but the British state. It's important we right those wrongs.
Alan Strickland.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In 14 years of Tory government, police numbers were decimated across our country, including in my constituency. Durham Constabulary lost 408 officers, a third of its strength. What steps will the government be taking to put police officers back on our streets?
As has been said a number of times this afternoon, the neighbourhood policing guarantee, 13,000 police officers, PCSOs and specials back on our streets. Police officers, PCSOs and specials on our streets to keep us all safe after the, I think it was over 20,000 police officers that party actually reduced.
Luke Taylor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The recent London Stalking Review published by the London Victims Commissioner reveals some pretty alarming statistics. In our capital, 45% of stalking victims felt compelled to withdraw from the justice system, and 41% said that no action was taken on their complaint by police. These statistics are particularly alarming. Therefore, I'd like to ask the Minister what specific measures are being taken to better support victims of stalking, and are there plans to offer specific training to officers to deal with these sorts of cases?
I thank him for his question, and absolutely we are looking at how we can strengthen stalking protection orders, look at our stalking laws in the round, but actually look at how policing handles all cases of violence against women and girls, and look at the training that will be needed.
Jacob Collier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. After 14 years of the party opposite, we hardly see police officers
on the beat across my constituency, with night policing cover in Uttoxeter and rural areas being virtually non-existent. Can I ask the Minister what steps they'll be taking to put more officers on the beat and the timeline for this?
Again, the neighbourhood policing guarantee, and most particularly, which I think will be important for the honourable gentleman, is a named police officer in the community, so people know who to go to when they need assistance. But the work is happening now. We're keen to see this, the first officers in place in the next few months.
Stevens.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In Rural Crime Action Week, does the Minister agree with me that in Bedfordshire, where we have major urban areas like Bedford and Luton, bordered by rural communities, it's important that the funding formula be reviewed so that equal attention can be paid to tackling crime in our rural villages and towns?
Well, I would gently remind the honourable member that his party's previous government did have very, very many years to fail to review the funding formula. But he's right that the issues around rural and urban areas are immensely important, and it's why we have committed to a rural crime action plan.
Abbott.
Mr. Speaker, I agree with the previous speaker. Despite previous governments' promises to reform funding settlements, as usual, they failed to deliver. So will the Secretary of State agree with me, review the current situation, reform the police funding formula, and finally deliver fairer funding for local people?
As part of the spending review, we will want to consider police funding in the round. This will include how police funding is allocated to forces. And I wish to also say that the sector, including the APCC and the MPCC, are engaged in that process.
Pritchard Holder.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Speaker. The Home Secretary is benefiting from some of the measures that my right honourable friendly member for Braintree brought in when he was in government, which has seen legal routes for migration causing a halving in the numbers of people able to come to the UK. What further measures is she taking to ensure that we see legal migration cut further?
The government is committed to bringing down legal migration, and we will be doing this by making sure that British workers are upskilled in key sectors with new requirements for employers to address skills shortages and introducing new training and workforce plans so that overseas recruitment does not remain the default for filling skills shortages in the UK.
Steve Young.
Mr. Speaker, I've listened in absolute amazement today to the outrage from members opposite that careful consideration to security around Taylor Swift's concerts in London a week after a Vienna tour was cancelled due to a terror plot. Does the Home Secretary think this is cynical opportunism from the party opposite, or have they just lost all sense of reason?
I think it's a matter for all of us to take immensely seriously the security of people, and also to make sure that terrorists, extremists and criminal threats don't win in their attempt not just to do threats to life, but also threats to our way of life.
Chair of the Select Committee, Curran Bradley.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and can I thank the House for putting your confidence in me to chair the Select Committee. I look forward to working constructively with the Department on Home Affairs matters. And in that vein, can I welcome the news that the Government is going to recruit 200 new personnel to process modern slavery claims. Can the Minister confirm whether these are new headcount, how long the training will take, and is she confident that this headcount will survive the forthcoming budget and spending review?
Can I congratulate the Right Honourable Member on her new position? It is a great job, and I do, of course, look forward to giving evidence to her as she did to me, and I would see what price I have to pay as the roles are reversed. She asks a really important point about the modern slavery numbers. We are recruiting additional members of staff. We'll happily provide her with more information about this crucial policy area.
Paul Foster.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Part 3 of the Data Protection Act imposes unnecessary obligations on the police, which requires them to redact personal data for information transferred to the CPS. These obligations delay and obstruct the swift progress of the criminal justice system. The Police Federation has proposed a new clause that, if enacted, would facilitate the free flow of personal data between the police and CPS. Will ministers please urgently look at reforming this unnecessary red tape to allow more police time on the streets in my constituency in South Ribble?
This is a really important point, and we are actively exploring all the ways that we can improve the guidance around redaction, streamline current processes, make better use of technology and ultimately reduce unnecessary burdens on the police and prosecutors so that they can get on with their primary task of keeping the public safe and putting away criminals.
Nick Timothy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Home Secretary has told the House that by ending the retrospective element of the duty to remove, she was saving £7 billion in 10 years. The impact assessment assumes that all those subject to the duty would have remained in Britain at a cost to the Home Office. But in his letter to me, her Permanent Secretary said the sum included the cost of sending the same migrants to Rwanda. I've written to the Home Secretary about this on the 1st of September. I've raised it with the Immigration Minister in Westminster Hall. I haven't had an answer. Can she explain this double counting? And if she can't, can she apologise for using that statistic to the House of Commons?
Well, as he will know, the impact assessment is provided by the Home Office, and what we inherited from the previous government was not simply the incredibly costly Rwanda programme, but also the retrospective element of the Illegal Migration Act, which was so damaging that actually the Shadow Home Secretary, when he was in the job, didn't implement many of the measures. That retrospective element has cost the Home Office hundreds of millions of pounds, and those costs would go forward into the future.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We want to support genuine refugees, but can I ask the Home Secretary for an update on the progress in terms of returns and deportations of illegal migrants, and how the new command arrangements improve on the arrangements of the previous government?
Honourable friend makes an important point, because in order to tackle the chaos in the asylum system, the rules need to be properly respected and enforced. That is why we have increased by more than 20% the enforced returns over the summer of those who have no right to be here. We have also increased the number of charter flights, including the biggest ever charter flight return.
Maguire.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Given the turnout for the Devon and Cornwall Police and Crime Commissioner election in May this year was just 18%, will the Minister look to scrap this role and invest that money instead in proper community policing in rural constituencies like mine of North Cornwall?
The Government have no plans to scrap the role of Police and Crime Commissioners. We think they are a valuable body that can enable the missions that this Government has set out to be enacted locally. So the Safer Streets mission, we need to work with the PCCs to make sure that that actually happens in the different force areas around the country. They also have a role to play with their other partners, local authorities and the voluntary sector.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Noisy off-road bikes speed around neighbourhoods like Chapeltown in my constituency, deliberately disturbing and intimidating residents. Will the Home Secretary commit to properly tackling off-road bikes by giving the police the right powers to crack down on this issue?
Honourable friend makes an important point, and I thank her for standing up for her community. We do want to strengthen the law to give the police more powers to tackle the nightmare of dangerous off-road bikes.
Sir David Davis.
When last year the Home Secretary called on the then Conservative government to use counter-terror legislation to prescribe organisations like the IRGC, she'll remember I supported her publicly. Since then, Iran and the IRGCs got even more dangerous. Has she changed her mind, and if so, why?
I have huge respect for the right honourable gentleman, but I would just gently point out that he's asking the government to do something that the previous government didn't do in 14 years. What I can say to him is that we are leading work on countering Iranian state threats, making use of the full breadth and expertise of our intelligence services and law enforcement agencies. We keep the list of prescribed organisations under very close review, and I can assure him that work continues apace to identify further ways to tackle the threat.
John Peace.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. UK universities have experienced a five-fold increase in anti-Semitic incidents since the 7th of October terrorist attacks. At a recent meeting of the Union of Jewish Students, I heard distressing examples of the Iranian regime organising on our campuses and stirring up hatred against Jewish students. Can the Minister tell the House what steps the Department is taking to deal with the threat posed by Tehran here on British soil?
Mr Speaker, we've been clear that the behaviour of the Iranian regime, including the actions of the IRGC, pose a threat to the safety and security of the UK and our allies. The Government continually assesses potential threats to the UK and takes the protection of individuals' rights, freedoms and safety incredibly seriously, wherever those threats may originate.
Mike Martin.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. In 2023, the Home Office commissioned the Fairfield Review into the Independent Office for Police Conduct. It deemed the delays in the IOPC as unacceptable. Indeed, one of my constituents has been waiting a year after the death of her daughter to have just a case officer assigned. Does the Home Secretary agree with the review, and will she comment on when she's going to implement the 93 recommendations from that review?
I have met with the IOPC Chair in order to talk through the issues that face them. He is right that we need to speed up the decision-making process. He will also recognise that there are considerable challenges in the system that we have inherited.
Dan Tomlinson.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and just to say thank you for making time for backbenchers today in the questions. I would like to raise the issue of car theft in my constituency. Many hundreds of residents have had their cars stolen, Mr Speaker, and the police do not have the capacity to follow up. Next year I'm hosting a car theft summit in Chipping Barnet, and I would like to invite the Minister to attend with me.
I would be delighted to.
Dave Dugan.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. After a bungled fraud investigation by Renault Credit International, Renault Credit, together with Renault Nissan UK Limited, moved to seize the assets of my Wrekin constituency, Mackie Motors Brickell Limited. This cost my constituent £500,000 and 25% of his order book value. Will the Secretary of State meet with me to discuss the finer points of this clearly very dubious act by a UK bank?
Very concerned to hear about the case that the honourable gentleman raises, and I'd be very happy to meet with him to discuss it further.
Clive Lewis.
Speaker, can I put on record my gratitude to the Home Secretary and her team for releasing the Home Office commissioned the historical roots of the Windrush scandal, which concluded that 30 years of racist immigration legislation caused the Windrush scandal, a report that the benches opposite spent 3 years trying to suppress. So will she meet with me, other MPs and civil society to discuss the recommendations of that report?
I thank my honourable friend for raising this, and it was indeed a shocking report and one that the previous government refused to publish. I'd be very happy to meet with him and other honourable members about the report.
Richard Tice.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Does the Secretary of State for the Home Department share my deep concerns about two-tier justice, given that some people who say some bad, stupid things on social media can be arrested, charged and jailed within a matter of weeks, but that actually some people who brutally assault, violently assault police officers have not even been charged many months later?
Well, the honourable member will know that in this country we have operational independence for the police, but also independence for the CPS and independence for the courts. I strongly support police officers and think that they have faced faced cases where they have faced the most disgraceful violence and attacks, and it's really important that we support our police in the face of those attacks and make sure that they have the whole community behind them.
Gregor Ponte.
Thanks so much, Mr Speaker. The Home Secretary will perhaps be aware of the data that the Internet Watch Foundation released last week, where they looked at the increasing numbers of AI-generated child sexual abuse content that is available on the Internet and to everyone now. In fact, they found that in the last 6 months alone, that number has increased the last 12 months. Now, this is clearly illegal. Can I ask the Home Secretary what the UK Government is doing to stamp down on this horrific crime?
I thank him for his question and wish to make clear that the new government is intending very swiftly to set up new task forces to ensure that cross-departmental and in this case working with our counterparts in science and technology, that we are doing everything we possibly can to end the scourge of online child abuse and child abuse not online.
Jim Shannon, are you not standing? Oh, okay, oh, good.
I'm always standing. And my question is, what steps have been taken within schools to display the opportunities available within the police force to enhance career opportunity for young people? Thank you, Mr. Speaker, very much.
It's always a pleasure to answer the honourable gentleman's question, and that work will be ongoing. Clearly, we want to recruit from the widest possible groups in our communities, and we want to encourage young people to think about a career in policing.
Right, that completes questions. We're going to go to the urgent question a minute. We'll just let front benches change over.